Alright, Tolkien fans, so answer me this. What are the Palantiri? Why was the Regent Queen Miriel in the Rings of Power series so attached to it that she felt the need to defend her ownership of it even as her fall became a sure thing? Palantiri are the most mysterious artifacts in Middle-earth's entire existence, with vast powers whose implications very few have truly come to understand. These soothsaying stones were always kept secret, with their powers being available to Middle-earth's top brass only. But innocent bystanders beware. The Palantiri have been known to become extremely dangerous and addictive entities, and the Lord of the Rings was chock full of devastating events set into motion by these orbs. Now that one of these crystal balls has begun to change the fortune of Numenor in Rings of Power, it's time we get to know what they're capable of. So let's get into it, explore the origins of the Palantiri and their role in making and breaking Middle-earth. Real quick, before we get into it though, we have a small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing. It's a small click for you, but it means a lot to us. Thank you.
Pippin.
What are the Palantiri? A Palantir is a dark, celestial-looking ball primarily used as a vision tool. Kings and royal commanders would use them to look at things that were far beyond their line of vision. Of course, the likes of modern phone apps such as FaceTime or WhatsApp call-in weren't exactly a thing in Middle-earth, but the Palantiri could be even more addictive than the whole video calling apps you and I are used to, if you can believe it. Created in the Undying Lands, either at an earlier point in the First Age or even before the onset of the ages, these seeing stones were made by the famed Noldor elves. They may even have been crafted by Fëanor himself, one of the greatest, most skilled Noldor to ever live and the creator of the Silmarils. The Palantiri varied greatly in size. They could be as small as a man's head or a much larger and heavier type. Although no text is totally clear about how many stones were created to start with, some were brought to Middle-earth for the Numenorians who remained faithful to the Valar. This is what the Rings of Power show seems to be working into their script with the stone that Miriel was using to look into Numenor's future. The communication between the Palantiri works something like this. The surveyor, or the person who wished to contact another stone, would point their stone towards the other's direction. Then, they use their thoughts to convey the message they want to send. They may even speak it out loud. The other stone's user would catch these thoughts, and this is how the two would sync up. Skilled surveyors could also witness events and places in the far reaches of Middle-earth through the Seeing Stone, but this art came with the dangerous prospect of being exposed to darker forces that might be trying to reach them too. The original users of the Palantiri and Amon had probably become skilled enough to shroud the stone, which basically means to darken the image that could be seen through their stone. This would help them ward off unwanted surveyors trying to intrude into their activities, but such next-level skill wasn't often seen in Middle-earth, where many had fallen victim to Sauron's eye by using the Palantiri.
Palantir.
How many Palantiri are there? We can trace back at least 8 of these magical seeing stones. The first and most powerful was the Master Stone, which rested in the Tower of Avalone on the Isle of Erisea, an onlooker's first sight on the beautiful continent of Amon. Aside from this, we aren't aware of how many Palantiri existed in the Valar's Undying Lands. They may even have been mass-produced since that's where they were from. People could have been using them like mobile phones for all. But the 7 remaining stones we know of were in Middle-earth. As previously mentioned, they were primarily given to the Numenorians. Later, in the Second Age, the Numenorians had some serious differences regarding their allegiance. They broke up into the Kingsmen, who were swayed by Sauron, shout out to Ar-Pharazôn from Rings of Power, who seems to be heading this route, and the Faithful, led by Amandil. As his name suggests, Amandil was faithful to Amon and the Valar, who had gifted him with the 7 Palantiri as a means to establish contact with him in the far-off continent. Amandil passed these stones on to his son, Elendil, who carried them away from Numenor as the island fell to its karma. He set sail for Middle-earth and established the northern kingdom of Arnor, and his sons, Isildur and Anarion, established Gondor in the south. 3 Palantiri remained in Elendil's northern kingdom, and 4 were given to his sons for the southern kingdoms. The Stones of the North. The Palantir that has come to the Rings of Power stage could be any of the 7 stones, but it is most likely the Elendil stone, as this stone could only be used to look into the west. Don't worry, we'll get into the details of this theory later in the video, but if the show is able to use the lore's progression to some extent, the Elendil stone will find its way into Elendil's hands at some point, and he'll take it to Middle-earth. So, the Elendil stone, which Elendil placed in Arnor, was set up facing west towards the Master Stone in Amon. It acted as a direct link between the Valar and the leader of the Faithful. After Elendil, the elves took care of this stone in the Tower of Emin Biraid. The elves revered this stone for its connection with the Valar, which remained intact even after all the chaos Sauron tossed up in the Third Age. After the War of the Rings, the Elendil stone was returned to the Undying Lands. Next up, we've got the stones of Amon-Sul and Annúminas. Annúminas was the first capital of Arnor. When the Kingdom of Arnor split up, both the Amon-Sul and Annúminas stones remained within the realm of Arthedain. FYI, the Shire crept up bang in the middle of Arthedain in the Third Age. I know your palms are beginning to sweat a bit with the list of places amassed by Middle-earth's constantly altering political lines. Remember guys, these things are happening over long ages, so things are gonna change. But a darker turn of events sank these stones to the bottom of the sea when the last king of Arthedain took a flight north. He did this to evade the Witch King's army, which was overrunning the entire place. He took a ship and went into the frosty northern sea, an ill-advised plan, when the ship was crushed by the icebergs teeming the sea and the king drowned with his 2 Palantiri. The stones were lost forever. Now, for the stones of the south, which have way more electrifying stories and an overall effect on the fortunes of Middle-earth. The Stones of the South. The biggest stone in Middle-earth was placed in Osgiliath, the capital of Gondor. This stone was so heavy that a single man could never hope to lift it and make a quick getaway. It was placed in a beautiful starry dome chamber called Osgiliath. Being the largest and most dominant, this stone could spy on all other stones. Unfortunately, this was also the first stone to be lost. This appears to have happened during the Kinstrife, a civil war that consumed Gondor and burnt through much of it. The Alpha Palantir of Middle-earth was lost in the turmoil and never found again. So now we're left with just 3, but these 3 were the game changers of the lot as they came into play during the Lord of the Rings. Let's begin with the stone in Isildur's city, Minas Ithil, where we had the Ithil Stone. This city came to be captured by Sauron's Nazguls, who transformed it into an ominous shadow of its old self, Minas Morgul. And so, the Ithil Stone came into Sauron's hands, and to the Dark Lord's credit, he used it more effectively than anyone else ever had. It was placed in Barad-dûr, where Sauron learned to become its most wicked surveyor. This stone was also likely destroyed with Barad-dûr when Sauron was defeated at the conclusion of the War of the Ring. Then there was the Arnor Stone, kept in Minas Tirith, an enduring secret of Gondor's stewards who cherished it but never dared use it. They knew some other stones may have landed in the wrong hands. Smart men. But when Denethor took charge of Gondor, Sauron's shadow was already stretching across his lands. He began to use it to watch over his kingdom, and while his intention was worthy, his joyride with the stone wasn't. We'll get to this grim story in detail when we discuss the Palantiri's role in The Lord of the Rings later in this video. The last of these stones, the Orthanc Stone, was the one that came into Sauron's possession, and he used it in the Orthanc Tower in Isengard. Even to this date, when we think of a Palantir, the image of Saruman, lost in a deep trance with his twisted fingers and fervent hand hovering over the Orthanc Stone, is the one that pops into our head. Are the Palantiri evil? Given the fiasco this mini planet-like orb has created in Numenor in Season 2 of The Rings of Power, essentially stripping Miriel of her Regent Queen status and giving Farazan the crown he so badly desired, we have to wonder, were the Palantiri as evil as Farazan's mob has made them out to be? To be fair, Rings of Power is loosely based on Tolkien's work, and they have also not worked on the stone's theft well in their version of Middle-earth. I mean, the way Elendil's insipid daughter, a character so tediously forced into the script that most people wouldn't even remember her name, steals the Palantir and reveals it at Miriel's coronation, had us all puffing out in agony. I mean, come on, this nobody's picking up a Palantir and making a run for it? These are heavy artifacts that can bewitch you with one look into them and bring you eye to eye with the Valar themselves. Anyway, that aside, the whole thing implied that the Palantir was evil and that Miriel was in with the elves like seed with soil. But Palantiri are not inherently evil entities. They don't have negative energies set within them. Instead, the dangers of using them arise from the individuals looking into them, those who own them and the others they're communicating. However, one thing is certain. They warrant great caution and are definitely not for the faint of heart. You might remember the sequence in Return of the King where the ever-blundering Pippin Took decided to swipe one from Gandalf and look into it, only to be totally sucked into the Palantir by the Dark Lord, which left him stunned and petrified. Needless to say, a Palantir is not something for a hobbit to fool around with. You had to be an iron-willed being of vast wisdom and grit to handle these bad boys. If someone wasn't careful enough, they could become obsessed with their seeing stone for its captivating visions and gradually fall into its vice. And another thing, the alignment of the Palantir was paramount to how effective it was, and Sauron was the only force in the Third Age that used this stone with complete mastery. But for all of Sauron's wily work, it was a Palantir that caused his downfall too, when Aragorn used it to trick the Dark Lord. And we've got all of that up for you next. Palantiri in The Lord of the Rings. In the Third Age, with Sauron's powers once again reaching their apex, the Palantiri rose to prominence once again. A Palantir was responsible for Saruman's exposure to Sauron and his consequent corruption. Being the most driven and passionate evil thing ever, Sauron was focused into his Ethel Stone on the regular. During one of his surveys, he caught Saruman, who had ventured his own sightings with his Orthanc Stone towards Mordor. Sauron was able to corrupt the Istari, who later came to play a significant role from Isengard in Sauron's war for Middle-earth. Denethor, the Steward of Gondor, also used the stone and unknowingly engaged Sauron. Well, he turned out to be a strong clog and didn't get swayed by Sauron as Saruman had. And this is partly because Denethor was not abusing the stone for visions quite like Saruman, who was popping that orb like he had a Zanny addiction. In fact, Denethor seldom went to the stone, just twice by our count. Unfortunately, on one of his rare look-ins, he rubbed shoulders with none other than the Great Foe. When Sauron locked eyes with Denethor, the steward held his own, but this wasn't exactly an easy task. Repelling Sauron's psychic might was a labor that aged the steward by decades in just one sitting. He also became super depressed after this, a splintered shell of a man, quite like what we see of him in The Return of the King. Denethor became paranoid and felt the future was dead. This definitively took the man to his end, and he was still holding the Arnor stone as he burnt to death on a pyre. But the stone's power also diminished with Denethor. Anyone who looked into it after this event only saw a vision of two burning hands. Now, I'm sure you remember the time Pippin gazed into a future where Minas Tirith was burning in the Peter Jackson Return of the King film. That vision didn't actually become a reality in the movie, even though Minas Tirith did suffer massive losses in the War for the Ring. Sauron forced this imagery into Pippin's mind to coerce him into giving him Frodo and the ring's location. Sauron had found Pippin as he had gazed into the Palantir and given him a taste of his power. The instances involving the Palantiri show us exactly why this device became such a dangerous prospect in the Third Age. It was because Sauron had one at his disposal, and you never knew when he might grab you with. But mind you, in the right hands, the Palantir also became a weapon that could be used against Sauron. Aragorn, our hero extraordinaire, used Gondor's Arnor stone to seek Sauron out himself, a courageous attempt to pull him into a ruse. Over the stone, they locked horns, or should we say thoughts. Aragorn declared himself the returning king of Gondor, wielding Narsil, the Elendil sword that had cut off Sauron's ringed finger in the War of the Last Alliance. Sauron was immediately riled and entirely distracted by Aragorn's trick, and this bought Frodo just enough time to destroy the ring. At the end of The Return of the King, Frodo boards a ship with the elves on their journey to Aman. The Elendil stone that had been kept safe by the elves all this time was also on that ship and was returned to the Valar's land. Palantiri in the Rings of Power. In the Rings of Power, the Numenor story arc is tightly tied to the visions Miriel has been seeing using her Palantir. By now, we know well that a Palantir can be used for dishonorable purposes. It can even show a twisted version of reality that the user of a connected Palantir wants you to see, but it cannot entirely subvert events. Miriel constantly sees visions of a great flood that will consume Numenor. Given her father, Tar Palantir's loyalty to the Valar, and the fact that she is still using the stones sent to the Numenorians from Aman point to the fact that the visions she is seeing through her Palantir are being shown to her by the Master Palantir in the Tower of Avalone. It is most likely a warning from the Valar. So far, this stone appears to be the Elendil stone, which was used only to look towards the Valar in Aman. No other stones can connect with it, and we haven't seen Miriel occupied with any other visions from afar aside from the Great Wave. Now, Tar Palantir was the name Miriel's father took when he ascended to the throne because of his gift of foresight. In the Rings of Power series, he seems to have foreseen the grim eventuality of Numenor sinking after the arrival of an elf. Miriel's Palantir visions verified his own visions as a very real future prospect. This doubles down on the theory that the stone's apparitions are being sent to her by a being of higher psychic and spiritual nature, which may be the Valar themselves. Based on the previews Rings of Power's been dishing out, we can presume Ar-Pharazôn will capture Miriel's stone. And nothing good can come from that guy using a Palantir, so we're up for a whole hot soup situation in Season 2 for sure. Marvelous verdict. The Palantiri are mighty stones that were crafted to be used with virtue and care, but life never goes according to plan, and neither did the Palantiri show. Throughout The Lord of the Rings, we saw their powers being used for Sauron's evil designs. Using the Palantir, Sauron got himself A. Saruman and his army, and B. the fall of the Steward of Gondor. Both of these things were crucial milestones for his war plans. A Palantir also gave Aragorn a chance to engage Sauron. His courage and strength to face Sauron's psychic onslaught pulled off probably the most incredible decoy in Middle-earth and brought about the end of the Dark Lord. The Palantiri are one of the most significant artifacts in Tolkien's works, second only to the Rings of Power themselves. And honestly, we look forward to seeing how the Palantir smash and grab is going to pan out for Pharazôn in the Amazon series. If he's able to connect with a stone that doesn't carry visions from Amon, then we'll know it isn't the Elendil stone he holds, but another of the 7. Now, we want to know about your favorite Palantir moments in the comments section down below. Is it from Lord of the Rings? Is it from the Rings of Power? Is it Pippin looking into dark powers beyond his comprehension? Let us know your thoughts in the comments section down below, and if you like this video, don't forget to smash the like button and hit subscribe if you haven't already. This is Wizard Wheezy signing off. Thanks for watching, stay safe out there, and have a marvelous day.